Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Site Owner Academy, which now we're also featuring just the recordings, not the entire Site Owner Academy sessions, but just the recordings of these presentations that you see if you're on YouTube and that you can hear our pleasant voices if you are on the podcast. Uh, right, Chris? That especially now, Chris is crystal clear with his brand new microphone. How are you
Yes,
doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Crystal clear, eh?
Yeah, it makes a world of a difference. The audio, I mean, it's like really good.
Good.
So kudos to you for joining 2020 with with the audio standards.
And the mute button does work because I hadn't configured it to accept these headphones, but I tested it while you were talking with Dr. B, and you couldn't hear me. Neither of you
Oh,
could hear me.
perfect. So it does work then. Good.
Yep,
Glad you're all set and situated.
yep.
So
The audience doesn't have to hear me sneeze or cough or burp or whatever the case may be.
right, yeah, the sports announcers have those also in the booth.
Exactly. Yep.
When they have to sneeze or cough, they just hit a button. So yeah, that's really good. I will get started, and Chris, thank you very much for putting up the slides. So this is about small physician private practices adding clinical research businesses to the private practice. We've actually been doing a lot of these kind of content recently because there's been a lot of pent up demand. I think a lot of these physicians who are used to being busy at a certain level because of the lockdowns and the social distancing requirements, the waiting rooms are not at full capacity. So they're not as busy as usual. And that means they're not making as much money as usual.
So they're looking
So
for new revenue streams, and that's a good point. So when things
Mhm.
return to normal, are they still going to be interested in research, though?
Well, that remains to be seen. I mean, I would assume the ones that are successfully doing research during the pandemic or have successfully figured it out will sort of see the light that we all saw at some point. I mean, we're not
Hmm.
physicians, but you know, it it's pretty much the same thing. Like we're still doing research. Some years are great, some years not so great as far as the sites are concerned, but I think it's a perfect supplement to any private practice, in
Yeah,
my
I
opinion.
would absolutely agree. Absolutely, especially at times like this, it's a good time to start because you have more time to figure out exactly how to do this when
Right.
you're slower.
And diversification is never a bad thing. I mean, the like starting these research sites, this is you're diversifying your practice. You're basically creating another revenue stream for your private practice. That really it is dependent on your private practice, but if you were to not do private practice anymore, as long as you've been able to build up a database of patients, your research clinic should still stand on its own, right? So
Hmm.
it's always better if you have the private practice as well. But yeah, so that's a good point, actually, Chris. How many doctors who are new to research and got into it because of the pandemic are going to stay? I mean, if you look at the stats before COVID, yeah, I think it's something like 90% of physicians who do their first study never do a second one. I
Yep.
don't think that's going to change whether there was a pandemic or not. So I think that's your answer is the like history.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Maybe a little less, just because again, it's still kind of slow, so they have more opportunity to figure it out. You got to think those statistics have been accumulated in times when things were normal and they were already busy. So they just can't dedicate themselves to learning the process. So maybe a little less than 90, but probably not significantly.
Okay, good. Yeah, so here you can see on the image, for those of you listening, there's a guy pushing, it could have been a female also, but pushing a boulder up a hill.
No, that pretty much
Okay.
looks like a guy.
Yeah,
But
no, that's a guy, but it could have been a female. I mean,
oh
you know,
yes, yes,
these days
I get
women,
your point now.
the other day I was on my exercise bike doing I'm on Peloton for those listening. and one of the instructors is like a former boxer. My wife was telling me, and she was like throwing these combos on the bike, and I had no idea she was a boxer, and I was like, wow, this girl looks like she could fight, and she was throwing like some mean combos, like shadow boxing, and then it turns out she's a professional fighter. So hats off to anyone doing stuff like that. That's hard no matter what your gender is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's somebody pushing up a boulder up a rock, and that's kind of the analogy to starting a research site. Um, Many people are aware of the low barrier to entry in research. It really is a low barrier of entry. The hardest part is like figuring out all the things, and that's where we kind of carved out our niche. We kind of are shedding light on how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Even though it's a relatively small audience, it is growing, and we appreciate you guys. But it's not like hard to get in. It's hard maybe to put all the information together. But within your first 2 years of opening a research site, those are the toughest years. And that's for any small business, but especially for research. A lot of expenses and little to no income. I mean, would you agree with this, Chris?
Not exactly. I would say that's probably true for the first year.
Mhm.
For probably the vast majority. I mean, some are successful almost right out of the gate, but I would say the first year, little to no income. I would hope to start seeing income after a year. At least you're break even, if not showing a profit after a year. Now, for some sites, especially in the more competitive areas, it could take longer, and usually it does. But again, there it's not always that case as well. I think a year is a good time point, not two.
A year, yeah. I think the reason Carlos put two is because in one of the podcasts, I think I mentioned your first 2 years are the toughest. If you get through those first 2 years, I think it should be relatively smooth sailing. Uh, I
That would
mean,
make sense. Yeah, I
but
could see that.
but when I
Most
say smooth
businesses,
sailing, yeah, when I say smooth sailing, though, I don't think that the business is guaranteed to continue growing every year. Uh, but the chances of you going out of business decrease tremendously after that second year.
yeah, every year you're in business after that second year, the less likely you're going out of business in the future.
Right. I mean, we run sites all the time. We run small sites, and some years we're doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
We're well past that 2 year mark for all of these sites that I'm talking about. The three that we primarily deal with on a
Right.
regular basis. Uh, it doesn't mean that we are always able to pay ourselves every year. But the years that we are able to pay ourselves sort of make up for the years that don't. So after that 2 year mark, it's hard to go out of business, right? At the minimum, the floor should be your business is just breaking even.
Mm-hmm.
That should be the floor after that 2 year mark, right? And then that should give you enough time to fix the problems, because you can only break even for so long before partners start to not get interested anymore. So you
Yeah.
gotta at some point rev it up, like this guy on the image, rolling the ball up the hill, the boulder up the hill. But we know many site owners that continue growing their site year after year, and just like we're growing our site network is a really good example of us continuing to grow year after year. And some of the sites that we own, their graph is more like up and down, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still trajecting for the most part up. If you look at a long enough time horizon, it should
Mm-hmm.
still be trending up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Site owners are forced to do most of the work for the first few years, and they can easily work 80 to 100 hours per week at
Yeah,
some point.
I don't know where Carlos is getting those numbers. 100 hours a
I
week, you're not
mentioned it.
sleeping.
I mentioned it in a podcast, and you took issue with that as well.
You
And
mentioned
I said,
80, and I took issue with it, not 100.
so Chris, what do you think about this heavy workload that can strain the site's ability to develop their business initially and find new studies?
Oh, absolutely. Now, when we speak of a heavy workload, I think 80 to 100 hours is not realistic. I don't think anybody can work 100 hours. I mean, unless they're using some sort of stimulant. some sort
Mhm.
of pharmaceutical help.
Yeah,
I don't
for
think
me it was
100 hours is possible.
a lot of coffee, a lot of caffeine was my stimulant.
Well, well, how many hours are in a week? 24 times 7 is 168.
Right.
So, yeah, 100 hours. Yeah, I don't think I've never worked 100 hours ever in a week.
Yeah. Well, there was certainly times where it felt that way for me. But it was probably closer to 80.
Yeah.
So the point is, you're gonna feel like this guy pushing this boulder up a hill when you're starting. There's a thing called momentum. Momentum is your friend. Momentum is very important in business. Um, Matter of fact, momentum, getting your business started is the process of creating momentum, right? So
Yeah.
that effort should make things easier for you once you have momentum. Uh, and to get momentum, okay, the dictionary definition of momentum describe it as the product of the mass and the velocity of an object. Translated into entrepreneurial terms, it's the product of who you are and the speed at which you're moving forward. This is coming from a book I'm reading by Patrick Bet-David, Your Next 5 Moves. And so the point of getting momentum is the next step is to scale, right? And you need the momentum in order to scale, because to scale, you need to create the systems so you can replicate your opportunities. But when you're creating momentum, you're creating opportunities. So that's why it's difficult. But we can go to the next slide. It's a great book, by the way, Your Next 5 Moves,
And I would
by Patrick
completely agree
Bet-David.
with the momentum. I would just like to add, I think starting out as a site owner, you most definitely, especially if much of this is new to you, you can anticipate putting in somewhere between 60 to 80 hours a week. I would say that's relatively common, my
Hmm.
opinion.
Hmm.
All right,
Absolutely.
next slide.
Next slide, sir. Medical assistant interns. A great, a great and a secret weapon of ours, medical assistants. Uh, One way to reduce the strain that sites experience is to find MAs to intern at the sites. MAs can be really good. Not only do they know how to draw blood and possibly set up the ECGs and collect vitals and all the things they were trained on doing, right? But you can actually find potential be a study coordinator amongst your medical assistant interns. And the best part about medical assistants is the fact that you don't have to pay for them. There are medical assistant schools located across the country, across the United States, that are looking for clinics like yours to send their externs to do an externship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the difference between an externship and an internship. I use them as the same. To me, they mean the same thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Point is, you're not paying for them. Uh, so you're getting essentially free labor. Now, not all the externs that you're gonna get are gonna be worthy of being coordinators. You're gonna learn that quickly. But typically, 1 out of the 10, from our experiences, 1 out of 10 show an interest in research beyond their colleagues, meaning they don't just do what you tell them because that's their job as far as an MA, but they take an initiative to get curious about research. Like, what is this clinical research stuff? 1 out of 10 will actually have that interest. And if you have that, you have potential because research is very interesting. And if somebody takes an interest to it, they're more likely to want to be a coordinator, right? So when you work with interns, you can look for ways for them to help you develop your business. Your medical assistant interns can review your clinic's EMRs to find patients that might qualify for a study. You can also look for incentives for MAs to find patient leads or talk to sponsor reps for new studies. I just talked to one of my Patreon members this morning She also happens to be in our CRA Academy, Chris. Did you know that one of my Patreons is actually in our CRA Academy, Chris?
I think you had mentioned that before. That rings a bell.
Yeah, we've had clients that are patrons, but this is the first time I think there's a student that's a patron. But we spent like
Yeah.
20 minutes this morning talking about building a brand and how if she really wants to demonstrate value to a site, she needs to learn now how to get studies. And it's really just a matter of going to clinicaltrials.gov and emailing people in regards to studies that they may have and the fact that you work with potential investigators who are looking to participate in studies. This is especially true in this day and age in a 2020 world where diversity is everything and minority participation is everything in clinical research. So if you're able to find clinicians, minority clinicians especially, then you can convince the sponsors. I mean, Chris, you and I are working on one of these projects right now where we're
Yeah,
looking
absolutely.
to increase diversity in 6 protocols, right? And so
Yep.
our theory has always been it's a grassroots approach. You want more African Americans in your studies. Guess what? I think you need more African American clinicians, whether they be nurse practitioners, physician assistants, or physicians themselves, participating in research. And what does that mean? That means that they should be doing something similar to Site Owner Academy. They should be educating themselves. They should be educating their staff. They should learn, what it takes to run a study, and they should be given the opportunity to create more revenue for their private practice by adding research. This is how we started this webinar with. So, if you are an intern, you have to integrate everything that you're learning. You have to integrate what sponsors want. Okay, what do sponsors want besides more patients? Obviously, everybody knows sponsors want more patients for their studies. But right now, sponsors want more minority patients above all else in their studies. So if I'm an intern, I take that piece of knowledge that I have, which is a fact. I take the other piece of knowledge where I know clinicians in certain areas, and then I put the two together. And you're the middleman or middlewoman. I mean, what better way to get yourself into clinical research than to be the connector? And we don't see too many people doing this, and it's tremendous opportunity. So
Hmm.
basically, all that to say, there is value in your interns. Sometimes there's much more value than you may think. What do you think about this?
Oh, absolutely. And I would especially agree with that last point you just made, the additional value, because maybe well, I wouldn't say maybe, almost certainly they know things that you do not know, and you never know when something may come up in which you need to do this particular activity or job or whatever it might be. You have no idea how to go about it, and here's this intern, maybe they're fresh out of college and they're just taking a couple of classes on this particular problem, and they can certainly help solve that problem for you.
Right, right. I think we can go to the last slide now. But this has been a great webinar, actually. Improving your site. Okay. So this is part of the scaling. So after the 2-year mark, right around the 2-year mark, some people get there sooner, some people it takes longer. Right around the time you've achieved momentum, basic momentum, sufficient momentum to start scaling, you need to start thinking about improving your site. So any intern, recruiter, or employee can help your site grow, but you can't expect them to constantly bring you more studies or patients. This is your duty as a site owner is to incentivize, motivate, and encourage your staff. Make sure you're doing all 3 of those. Okay. Learn about the what motivates people. Not everyone is motivated by the same things. Yes, money is typically one of the ways that most people have in common is their desire to make a living, their necessity to make a living. But some people are more motivated by money as opposed to others. So there are plenty of people, you and I both know them, Chris, they make enough to where uh, any incentives, they're not really even interested. So you have to start looking for other things. What motivates this person? What's going to drive this person? Is it praise? Is it private praise? Is it public praise? Is it being sentimental? Maybe like a gift. Different people, different strokes for different folks.
Yep.
And that's your job as a site owner. And guess what? Your job as a site owner never ends. I mean, even if you hire a professional manager to run the clinic for you, who's managing that manager? At the end of the day, the buck stops with the owner. Um, there are no shortcuts to starting a site, and it can take years for the site to start running independently, meaning it can take years to develop enough momentum to kind of take your foot off the gas a little if you want. And
Yep.
you
I would
never
agree
should do
completely.
it. You never really should take your foot off the gas. And this is why our service for helping sites get more studies is in such high demand and has been in great demand during this pandemic. People
Yep.
understand that for $1,000, I think we're back to $1,300 a month now. But during the
Now
pandemic,
we need to discuss that because I'm not sure what our price point is right now.
point is, it's either 1,000 or 1,300.
That would be a good point.
This is per month. This is the value you're getting here is beyond. I mean, we get study leads every week, but we help you with the budgets. We help you with any questions you may have. We help you scale your business. We help you get momentum. We help you with your training of your staff through our CRC academies. There's a lot, so I guess it's a good commercial to end it on. What do you
Sure.
think, Chris?
And
Anything else?
well, that last bit there, I would take it a step further. I just happened to answer an email yesterday um, from a client from a long time ago had reached out to say that they'd like to start service again. But they asked if they could just pay like a per service fee, and my response to that was, we're at a price point already where that per service charge would be our monthly fee. We're priced so low, which I believe we are, that if you wanted to just hire us to negotiate a budget for you, say, it would cost that monthly fee. If you were to hire anybody else to do so, that's probably at minimum what you would get charged. I know our competitors charge more than that for negotiating a budget. So
That's right.
it's at a very low price point.
There's
And
tremendous
just
value in
for,
what we do.
yep, and for just anybody who's still a hanger on, Dan, I looked this up real quick because I've also been confused by what the difference is between an extern and an intern. So I figured it was an optimal time to look it up and see what the difference is.
Okay.
So an extern is always just an observer. They're never participating in any task directly. They're never paid, and it's usually for a very short period of time, and they're most often still in school. So they'll do this on winter break or something of that nature, winter or summer break typically. An intern takes on tasks of the company, so they're actually going to be helping, right? They're going to be doing things that are directly involved with the company's production, whatever they're doing.
I gotcha.
It's longer, and oftentimes they are paid interns, just at a lesser amount than somebody that they've actually hired.
I see. Yeah. So I guess in research, other than the getting paid part, what we referred to, I guess, were interns. Although interestingly enough, the schools refer to them as externs. So
Right, because
yeah.
that's where they usually come from as externs, right? They're in school still, and they're doing it
Okay.
for just to watch and learn how things are done at that company, but they're not actually participating in those activities.
Right. Other than drawing blood, because they do want them to draw blood and do vitals and those kind of things.
That would be an intern then, because they're actually involved,
Yeah. Yeah. So most
according
of
to the
them.
definition I read.
Yeah, that would make sense, but it wouldn't make sense for the school to call them externs in that case.
Right, especially if they
Because,
expect them to do something.
right, yeah, because they're the expectation is that they're gonna draw blood and help you out with the things you need help with.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, what a great presentation. Thank you everybody for watching and listening, and thank you, Chris, and we'll catch you all later.